Some memories never fade. They have fur, bright eyes, and the gift of loving us without saying a word. Because every dog carries a story, and maybe a part of yours. Get ready to discover more than a breed. Discover a lifelong companion.
The pug is one of the most recognizable breeds in the canine world. Just see that flat snout, those huge and expressive eyes, that characteristic curled tail, and you instantly know you're looking at a pug. But have you ever stopped to wonder why these characteristics exist? Each peculiarity of the pug has a fascinating story involving genetics, thousands of years of artificial selection, and human decisions that shaped this breed until it became what it is today. Some of these characteristics were intentionally developed for aesthetic or practical reasons, while others are unintended consequences that bring significant health challenges. Let's start with the most iconic and intriguing characteristic, that perfectly curled tail over the back. But what exactly causes this peculiar curl? The tail of any dog is composed of caudal vertebrae, which are a continuation of the spinal column. A dog with a straight tail, like a German Shepherd or a Labrador, has uniform vertebrae that fit linearly, allowing free movement. The pug, however, has something very special: hemivertebrae. These are wedge or triangle-shaped vertebrae instead of cylindrical like in conventional breeds. To understand better, imagine stacking normal rectangular bricks. You naturally build a perfectly straight wall. Now imagine stacking wedge-shaped bricks, like those used in architectural arches. You inevitably create a curve. The same principle applies to the pug's vertebrae. The pug has between 14 and 21 caudal vertebrae, which is a smaller number than long-tailed breeds, and several of these vertebrae are hemivertebrae, creating that characteristic spiral that everyone loves. Experienced breeders distinguish different qualities and types of curled tails. The single tail presents one complete turn over the back and is considered good and acceptable within the breed standard. The double tail, on the other hand, presents two complete turns and is considered absolute perfection, being the most valued standard in dog shows and indicating superior genetics. Interestingly, only about 25% of pugs have a natural double tail. There's also the corkscrew tail, which is a super tight spiral literally glued to the body, and the loose tail, which presents incomplete curling and is considered a fault in the breed standard. The genetics behind this fascinating characteristic was unraveled by recent studies that identified at least 5 main genes involved in the pug's tail shape. The most important gene is DVL2, also known as disheveled 2, and mutations in it directly affect vertebral development during the embryonic phase. A study published in 2016 in the prestigious scientific journal PLOS Genetics showed that this specific mutation is present in 97% of pugs with curled tails. Other important genes include the T-box genes, especially TBXX, which regulate how many vertebrae form and how they develop, PAX1, which influences vertebral core formation, HOXD genes that control developmental patterns along the animal's entire body axis, and FGF8, which is fundamental for adequate bone growth and development. The genetic inheritance of this characteristic follows an autosomal dominant pattern, which means the puppy only needs to inherit one copy of the mutated gene from just one parent to develop a curled tail. However, the intensity of the curl, whether it will be single or double, depends on how many of these mutated genes the dog inherits from both parents. That's why even in litters from parents with perfect double tails, some puppies may present tails with less pronounced curling. They simply inherited some, but not all the genetic variants necessary for maximum curling. The curled tail is not a recent genetic accident. More than 2,000 years ago, during the Han Dynasty in China, which lasted from 206 BC to 220 AD, imperial breeders were already intentionally selecting dogs with progressively more curled tails. These dogs were called Lo Chiangse, which in Chinese literally means coiled tail dog. But why was this characteristic so valued by ancient Chinese breeders? There were quite logical, practical reasons. After all, short and curled tails didn't knock over delicate objects in luxurious palaces full of valuable porcelain and elaborate decorations. There was also profound cultural symbolism. As in Chinese philosophy, the spiral represents spiritual growth, cosmic harmony, and the sacred connection between heaven and earth. Therefore, the curled tail carried meaning far beyond the physical. Additionally, ancient Chinese culture greatly valued perfect geometric shapes, and the spiral was considered a manifestation of supreme beauty and mathematical perfection. For centuries and centuries, only dogs with the best and most perfect tails were selected for reproduction. This means that generation after generation, imperial breeders exclusively chose the specimens with the most pronounced curling to mate, progressively increasing the frequency of genetic variants responsible for hemivertebrae in the population. Over dozens or even hundreds of generations, these variants became practically fixed in the breed, becoming a definitive and inescapable characteristic of the modern pug. Tibetan Buddhist monks also maintained similar lineages of small dogs with curled tails in their remote mountain monasteries, using them as sacred companions during meditations and rituals. There is historical evidence that occasionally there was exchange of dogs between the imperial Chinese court and Tibetan monasteries, which enriched the gene pool and strengthened desired characteristics. The breed remained practically geographically isolated in Asia until the 16th century, when Dutch traders from the powerful Dutch East India Company began bringing these exotic dogs to Europe through their extensive trade routes with China. Pugs quickly became the absolute favorites of European nobility, winning hearts in all courts of the continent. In Europe, artificial selection continued obsessively focusing on the curled tail as a distinctive characteristic of the breed. The breed standards, formally established in the 19th century by the prestigious English Kennel Club, specified extremely clearly that the tail should be curled as tightly as possible over the hip. The double tail was and continues to be to this day the absolute ideal of perfection. A fascinating genealogical study published in 2019 managed to meticulously trace the lineage of modern pugs around the entire world and discovered something surprising. Virtually all officially registered pugs today descend from only about 50 dogs that were imported to England between 1860 and 1900. This extremely narrow population bottleneck means that the breed's genetic diversity is quite limited and explains why the genes responsible for the curled tail are present in practically 100% of individuals in the breed currently. But here we arrive at the dark and worrying side of this apparently charming story. The same hemivertebrae that create that adorable curled tail can appear in other parts of the spine, not just in the tail. A comprehensive study conducted in 2018 by the renowned University of Copenhagen examined detailed radiographs of 347 pugs and discovered that an impressive 82% presented hemivertebrae also in the thoracic or lumbar spine, critical regions that support body weight and protect the spinal cord. These hemivertebrae in inappropriate locations can cause serious health problems, including spinal cord compression, severe chronic back pain, progressive neurological problems, and in more severe and extreme cases, even partial or total paralysis of the hind limbs. This is a profoundly important ethical issue that the community of breeders and breed lovers needs to honestly confront. By obsessively selecting for increasingly curled tails over generations, we are inadvertently also selecting for potentially debilitating vertebral problems. It's a dilemma that puts aesthetic desire and animal health and welfare in direct conflict. But the curled tail is only the first of the fascinating secrets of the pug. The second most iconic and recognizable secret is certainly that dramatically flattened snout that gives the pug its unique and unmistakable appearance. This striking characteristic has a precise scientific name, brachycephaly, which comes from the Greek brachys, meaning short, and cephalus, meaning head. But what exactly happens anatomically in a pug's skull to create this so distinctive appearance? In normal snouted breeds, technically called mesocephalic, like Labradors, Golden Retrievers, or German Shepherds, the skull bones maintain balanced and harmonious proportions. The length of the snout, which includes the maxilla and mandible, is approximately equal to the length of the skull proper. In the pug, however, the snout bones are drastically shortened while the skull maintains a relatively normal size. It's literally as if someone had physically pushed the snout into the face, compressing all structures in a much smaller space than they should naturally occupy. Brachycephaly is caused by specific mutations in genes that regulate craniofacial bone growth during critical embryonic development. The main genes involved are SMART2, also known as spark-related modular calcium binding 2, which was identified in an absolutely revolutionary study published in 2017 in the prestigious scientific journal Current Biology as the master gene of brachycephaly. A very specific mutation in this gene is present in practically all brachycephalic breeds in the world, including pugs, bulldogs, Pekingese, and many others. Another important gene is BMP3, or bone morphogenetic protein 3, which directly regulates cartilage growth that forms the structural base of the skull. THBS2, or thrombospondin 2, also plays a crucial role affecting the ossification process during fetal development. What is truly fascinating from an evolutionary point of view is that these mutations arose completely independently in different parts of the world throughout human history. Pugs in ancient China, bulldogs in Victorian England, Pekingese also in Imperial China, all developed similar mutations through parallel artificial selection processes conducted by breeders who never had contact with each other. This demonstrates that when humans consistently select for a specific visual characteristic, evolution can find similar genetic solutions convergently. But why did breeders in different cultures decide to create such dramatically flattened snouts? In ancient China, meticulous historical records from the Song dynasty, which ruled between 960 and 1279 AD, indicate that flattened snouts were extremely valued because they made dogs appear to have almost human faces. This made the animals much more expressive and created a profoundly stronger emotional connection between dog and owner. These dogs were frequently described in documents of the time as small furry people, reflecting how they were perceived almost as family members with almost human status. There was also a considerable practical function, as some historians specialized in cynology suggest that short-snouted dogs were significantly better for living in luxurious indoor environments, since they didn't snout around the furniture as much and were less destructive with delicate and valuable objects. There is also the phenomenon of human sexual selection. Humans have an extremely strong evolutionary tendency to find neotenous characteristics, which are infantile characteristics, extremely attractive and irresistible. This includes large round eyes, a rounded and soft face, and a short snout. These are all characteristics of mammalian puppies, and they powerfully activate our parental and care instincts, making us want to protect and pet the animal. Pugs, with their combination of ultra-short snout, huge eyes, and perpetually infantile expression, are evolutionary masters at activating these human psychological triggers. But here is the absolutely tragic side of this story. Brachycephaly causes a devastating set of health problems, clinically known as brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome. This syndrome includes several anatomically related conditions that work together to severely compromise the animal's breathing. First, there are stenotic nares, which are anatomically very narrow nostrils that drastically hinder air entry. Veterinary studies show that approximately 65% of pugs present this problem to some degree of severity. Second, there is elongated soft palate, a condition where the roof of the mouth is too large and long for the small snout, hanging down and potentially partially blocking the upper airway. This condition is present in approximately 78% of pugs, according to a comprehensive study from the University of Cambridge published in 2016. Third, many pugs present hypoplastic trachea, which is an abnormally anatomically narrow trachea present in up to 55% of studied cases. In more severe and progressive cases, laryngeal collapse can occur, where the larynx's cartilaginous structure gradually weakens and literally collapses on itself, completely blocking air passage. The practical consequences of these conditions are devastating to the animal's quality of life. Practically 100% of pugs snore loudly during sleep, present severe intolerance to even moderate physical exercise, have dramatic intolerance to heat because they cannot cool themselves adequately through panting, which is the main canine thermoregulation mechanism, and in severe cases may even faint from lack of adequate oxygen reaching the brain during physical activity or stress. A rigorous comparative study published in 2020 measured blood oxygen saturation levels during moderate physical exercise and discovered that pugs have on average 3 to 7% less oxygen saturation than normal snouted breeds during physical activity, which means their tissues and organs are constantly receiving less oxygen than ideal for adequate metabolic function. This is not just uncomfortable, it's medically concerning and significantly reduces life expectancy and quality. Recently, there is a growing and increasingly vocal movement among ethical breeders and concerned veterinarians to produce what has been called retro pugs or healthy pugs. These dogs maintain the general characteristic appearance of the breed but have snouts approximately 2 to 3 centimeters longer than the traditional standard, which drastically and provenly reduces respiratory problems without sacrificing the essential appearance that makes a pug recognizable. Some progressive cynological clubs in Germany and Holland have already officially modified their breed standards to encourage and even require slightly longer snouts in show dogs. It's an important and necessary evolution in the right direction, prioritizing animal health and welfare over extreme and potentially cruel aesthetic standards. The third fascinating secret of the pug are those absolutely huge, round, and incredibly expressive eyes that are one of the breed's most adorable and striking characteristics. But why are they so dramatically large and prominent? The answer has two anatomically related parts: shallow orbits and ocular proptosis. Remember the brachycephaly we discussed? When the snout is genetically pushed inward during development, this profoundly affects the entire skull, not just the snout. The ocular orbits, which are the bony cavities where the eyeballs are protected, become much shallower than normal. To understand better, compare a shallow bowl with a deep bowl. In a shallow bowl, a ball is much more exposed and prominent, while in a deep bowl, the same ball is more protected and recessed. The same principle applies to the pug's eyes. The pug's eyes are not really larger in terms of absolute volume than those of other breeds of similar body size. They simply appear much larger because they are significantly more projected outward from the face, with much less bony protection around them, creating that bulging eye appearance that is so characteristic. The same genes that cause brachycephaly also directly affect the development of the ocular orbits during the embryonic phase. But there are additional genes specifically involved in ocular development, including PUG6, which is considered the master gene of ocular development in practically all vertebrates, and variations in it affect both the size and shape of the eye. 6.3 is also important, regulating the growth of bony structures and soft tissue that surround and support the eye. Detailed anatomical studies in pugs show that they have specific variants of these genes that result in orbits between 30 and 35% shallower compared to mesocephalic breeds of similar size. But here is something absolutely fascinating from a behavioral and evolutionary point of view. The pug's large and expressive eyes are not just aesthetically pleasing, they dramatically amplify the capacity for emotional communication between dog and human. An innovative study conducted in 2019 at the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom systematically examined how humans interpret and respond to canine facial expressions of different breeds. The researchers discovered that pugs and other breeds with prominent eyes were 43% more effective in communicating the emotion of sadness to human observers, 38% better at expressing surprise in a way that humans could recognize, and generated an impressive 52% more empathetic emotional response in human observers compared to breeds with less prominent eyes. Evolutionarily speaking, through thousands of years of artificial selection, pugs essentially became genetic specialists in manipulating human emotions using their dramatic and expressive eyes as a communication tool. It's a fascinating example of how genetics can find and exploit a psychological hack in the human mind. But as always, this extraordinary beauty has a significant price in terms of health and vulnerability. Eyes so prominent and exposed are dramatically more vulnerable to injuries and diseases. Proptosis, which is when the eye literally comes completely out of the orbit, can happen in pugs, and approximately 1 in every 200 pugs will experience this at some point during their life. Relatively minor trauma, such as pulling the leash too hard or a light blow to the head, can cause this terrifying condition, which is an absolute veterinary emergency. Corneal ulcers are extremely common because exposed eyes are much more easily scratched by vegetation, toys, or even the dog's own paws. Studies show that between 15 and 20% of pugs will develop corneal ulcers at some point in their lives. Dry eye, technically called keratoconjunctivitis sicca, is a condition where there is inadequate tear production to keep the eye lubricated and affects about 8% of pugs. Entropion, where the eyelids turn inward, making the eyelashes constantly scratch the cornea, causing chronic irritation, is present in approximately 12% of the breed. Distichiasis, where eyelashes grow in anatomically abnormal places on the eyelids and scratch the cornea, is also relatively common. Every responsible pug owner must implement rigorous daily eye care, including carefully cleaning the eyes with appropriate ophthalmic solution, actively protecting the dog's face during play, avoiding branches, tall grass, and aggressive dogs, never ever pulling the leash forcefully, checking daily for redness or abnormal discharge, and visiting a specialized veterinary ophthalmologist at least annually for preventive examinations. The fourth fascinating secret are those deep and adorable facial wrinkles that give the pug a unique expression of perpetual concern that humans find irresistible. But where do these so distinctive wrinkles come from? They are the direct result of significant excess skin relative to the drastically reduced skull from brachycephaly. When the snout was genetically shortened over generations of selection, the total amount of facial skin did not decrease proportionally to the reduced skull size. The inevitable result is skin literally left over and forming deep folds and wrinkles all over the face. Experienced breeders and judges at dog shows pay special meticulous attention to wrinkles because they are considered a defining characteristic of specimen quality. The official FCI standard specifies very clearly that wrinkles should be large, deep, and well-defined. There is even an extremely specific desired pattern called the thumb mark or prince mark, which is a prominent vertical wrinkle on the forehead that visually resembles the traditional Chinese character for prince, which is written like this: Wang. Historically, in imperial China, pugs born with this specific facial mark were considered canine royalty and treated with special reverence. Some historians specialized in sinology propose an interesting, although not completely proven, theory. In ancient China, some pugs were occasionally used in ritual combat, which wasn't violent in the modern sense, but more like wrestling or canine Greco-Roman fighting. The deep wrinkles supposedly served a protective function, directing blood and sweat away from the vulnerable eyes, keeping vision clear during combat. The historical evidence for this theory is relatively weak and controversial, but the theory persists and is repeated in some circles of breed enthusiasts. Wrinkles are genetically controlled by genes that regulate various aspects of skin development and maintenance. Collagen production, specifically genes COL1A1 and COL1A2, is crucial because pugs have specific variants of these genes that produce significantly more flexible, elastic, and loose skin than smooth and tight-skinned breeds. The FOXI3 gene is associated with skin hyperplasia, which is literally excess production of skin tissue and appears in several breeds with excessive skin, including pugs, sharpies, and bulldogs. Subcutaneous fat distribution, controlled by specific metabolic genes, also affects where and how wrinkles form on the face. A fascinating study published in 2021 at the University of California examined pug skin at a molecular and microscopic level and discovered something surprising. Pugs have approximately 18% more fibroblasts, which are the cells responsible for producing collagen, than smooth-skinned breeds. However, paradoxically, the collagen these fibroblasts produce is structurally looser, less organized, and less dense, creating exactly that characteristic wrinkle texture. But here is the least-known secret frequently ignored by inexperienced owners. Deep facial wrinkles create warm, moist, and dark microenvironments that are absolutely perfect for uncontrolled bacterial and fungal growth. Fold dermatitis, also technically called intertrigo, is chronic skin inflammation that occurs specifically within wrinkles and folds and affects between 40 and 60% of pugs at some point in their lives. Fungal infections, especially caused by Malassezia, which is an opportunistic fungus that absolutely loves moist and warm environments, are extremely common and cause that characteristic Frito or popcorn smell that many experienced pug owners immediately recognize. Debris accumulation, including dirt, food particles, and tears that constantly flow from the prominent eyes, accumulate in the wrinkles, creating perfect culture medium for microorganisms. Skin ulcers can develop when constant friction between skin folds causes chronic abrasion that cannot heal adequately. Every responsible pug owner absolutely must meticulously clean facial wrinkles daily, not weekly but daily, using specialized canine facial wrinkle wipes or sterile gauze soaked with mild antiseptic solution recommended by a veterinarian. Crucially, it is absolutely essential to completely dry each wrinkle after cleaning, because residual moisture dramatically worsens problems instead of improving them. Special attention should be given to the large nasal wrinkle that sits directly above the snout, as this tends to accumulate more dirt and moisture. Owners should vigilantly observe any sign of redness, unpleasant odor, or abnormal discharge. Some veterinarians recommend using unscented baby powder or pure cornstarch to keep wrinkles dry between cleanings, but this should only be done with specific veterinary approval and guidance. The fifth secret of the pug is that incredibly compact and muscular body that lives up to the breed's official motto. The pug's motto is multum in parvo, a Latin expression that literally means a lot in a little and perfectly describes the physical structure of these dogs, a large dog compressed into a small body. According to official standards established by international cynological organizations, the ideal pug should measure between 25 and 28 centimeters at withers height, which is the highest point of the shoulder, and weigh between 6.3 and 8.1 kilograms, with males tending to be slightly larger and heavier than females. The body shape should be essentially square and compact, which means the body length measured from chest tip to rump tip should approximately equal the height measured from ground to withers. But the most striking and surprising physical characteristic is the musculature. Well-bred pugs maintained in adequate physical condition are surprisingly muscular, dense, and solid for their relatively small size. When you pick up a healthy pug, it feels much heavier than you would expect looking just at its size, because there is much more muscle mass compressed into that small body. The compact structure comes from specific gene combination that were selected over centuries. The LCOL gene, which literally controls leg height and length in dogs, has a specific variant in pugs that severely limits long leg growth, keeping them short and robust. IGF-1, also known as insulin-like growth factor 1, is a gene whose mutation was discovered in a fundamental 2007 study and is directly responsible for small size in several toy and miniature breeds. Pugs possess a double copy of this mutation, inherited from both parents, which ensures their consistently small size. FGF4 is a fascinating retrogene that causes chondrodysplasia, which is a form of dwarfism characterized by disproportionately short legs relative to the body, and although it's more famous in dachshunds and basset hounds, pugs have a mild variant of this gene that contributes to their short legs. Myostatin genes, abbreviated as MSTN, directly regulate muscle mass, and pugs have specific variants that promote greater muscle development relative to body size, giving them that characteristic muscular and compact appearance. But this compact construction and unique body structure bring significant health challenges that every owner needs to be aware of. Hip dysplasia, which is a malformation of the hip joint where the femoral head doesn't fit adequately into the hip socket, causing wear, pain, and eventually severe arthritis, affects between 50 and 60% of pugs to some degree of severity throughout their lives. Patella luxation, which is when the kneecap literally comes out of its normal position in the femoral groove, causing acute pain and lameness, is present in about 30% of the breed. Joint overload is inevitable because much body weight concentrated in a small compact structure wears joints prematurely, leading to early arthritis, often appearing at 5 or 6 years years of age instead of the 10 or 12 years that would be normal in larger breeds. The tendency toward obesity is an absolutely critical and epidemic problem in the breed. Pugs have naturally slower metabolism than many other breeds of similar size, and their compact structure combined with respiratory problems that limit exercise creates the perfect storm for easy and rapid weight gain. Epidemiological studies show that an impressive 60% of pugs are clinically obese or at least significantly overweight, which dramatically exacerbates all other health problems of the breed, including respiratory difficulties, joint problems, and even heart problems. The sixth fascinating secret is the pug's coat, which, although it appears simple at first glance, has surprisingly complex and interesting color genetics. The official breed standard recognizes 4 main colors as acceptable. The fawn color, called fawn in English, is by far the most common and popular, presenting a golden beige tone that can vary from very light, almost cream, to intense golden. Solid black is the second most common color, where the dog is completely black including mask, body, and limbs. Silver presents light grayish and silvery tones that are quite rare and highly valued. Apricot shows a more orange and warm tone than standard fawn, also relatively rare. It is absolutely crucial to note that all colors except solid black must mandatorily have the characteristic black mask, which means black snout, black ears, and ideally the black thumb mark on the forehead. Coat color in the pug is controlled by a complex and fascinating series of genes that interact in specific ways. The E locus, also called extension, fundamentally controls whether dark pigment called eumelanin is distributed throughout the dog's body. Dogs with EE or EE genotype develop characteristic black mask, while dogs with EE genotype don't develop mask and are automatically disqualified in official shows. The K locus, called dominant black, is crucial because the KB genotype produces solid black pugs, while KY allows other colors to express. The A locus, known as agouti, controls specific patterns of color distribution throughout the body and interacts complexly with other genes. The B locus, called brown, is extremely important for the breed standard because the BB genotype produces completely black nose and mask as desired, while BB would produce brown nose and mask, which is considered a very serious and disqualifying fault in the standard. A comprehensive genetic study published in 2018 meticulously sequenced the complete DNA of 200 pugs of different colors from various parts of the world and managed to create a complete and detailed genetic map of all possible genotypes for each officially recognized color variation in the breed standard. Pugs have short, smooth, and dense coat that appears relatively simple to maintain, but there are actually 2 distinct varieties. The double coat variety, which is by far the most common, has an outer layer of thicker hairs and an inner layer of soft and dense undercoat. The single coat variety, extremely rare and found only in some specific modern lineages, has only the outer layer without undercoat. Here is the big secret that every pug owner needs to eventually discover. Usually, shockingly, pugs shed an absolutely absurd and disproportionate amount of hair considering their small size. It's something that surprises and often distresses new owners. But why does this happen with such intensity? First, the hair growth cycle in pugs is much faster than in most breeds, with each individual hair having a lifespan of only 60 to 90 days before falling out and being replaced by new hair. Second, coat density is impressive, with pugs having approximately 600 to 900 individual hairs per square centimeter of skin, compared to only 200 to 400 hairs per square centimeter in long-haired breeds like golden retrievers. Third, and perhaps most important, pugs have very poor thermal regulation due to the short snout that can't adequately cool air, so they compensate using accelerated hair exchange as an additional body temperature regulation mechanism. A humorous but methodologically rigorous study conducted by curious veterinarians calculated that a medium-sized pug sheds approximately between 2 and 3 kilograms of hair per year, which seems impossible considering the entire dog only weighs 6 to 8 kilos. But it's absolutely true because the hair is constantly growing and falling in rapid cycles. Powerful vacuum cleaners, lint rollers for clothes, and rigorous daily brushing become absolutely essential for anyone who chooses to share their life with a pug. The seventh and final fascinating secret is the absolutely unique and distinctive personality of the pug. Pugs are often affectionately called the clowns of the canine world due to their frequently comical behavior and constant attempts to entertain their owners. But is this characteristic temperament genetically influenced, or is it just the result of training and socialization? The scientific answer is that definitely both factors contribute, but there is a surprisingly strong and well-documented genetic component. A comprehensive survey published in 2019 by the renowned University of Helsinki in Finland systematically examined the temperament of 15,000 individual dogs representing 50 different breeds using standardized tests and detailed questionnaires. Pugs scored distinctively on several fundamental behavioral dimensions. In sociability with humans, Pugs scored an impressive 9.2 out of 10 points, making them one of the absolutely most social and human interaction-oriented breeds. In aggressiveness, they scored only 1.3 out of 10, making them one of the least aggressive breeds studied both with humans and with other dogs. In fear and anxiety, they scored 4.1 out of 10, which is moderate to low, indicating generally confident temperament. In playfulness or tendency to play, they scored 8.7 out of 10, indicating they are extremely playful and maintain juvenile behavior even in adulthood. In human dependence, they scored the absolute maximum of 9.5 out of 10, indicating they simply don't like being alone and need almost constant human company. Specific genes were identified as having direct influence over aspects of temperament in pugs. The OXTR gene, which encodes the oxytocin receptor, which is the social bonding hormone, has variants in pugs that are strongly associated with greater sociability and deep bonding with humans. HTR2A, which encodes a serotonin receptor, has variants associated with calm, relaxed, and significantly less aggressive behavior. DRD4, which encodes a dopamine receptor, is related to novelty-seeking, curiosity, and playfulness, and pugs have variants that promote these behaviors. A comparative genomic study published in 2020 systematically compared the complete genomes of pugs with naturally aggressive guardian breeds like Rottweilers and Dobermans and found statistically significant differences in 12 genes directly related to social behavior, aggressiveness, and temperament. Absolutely typical behavioral characteristics of pugs include the Velcro dog phenomenon, where they literally follow their owners absolutely everywhere in the house, from bedroom to bathroom to kitchen, never leaving the owner alone for a second. This is not accidental or the result of poor breeding, but is genetically programmed behavior after centuries of selection for dogs that provided constant and intense human companionship. Clown behavior is also characteristic, where pugs often do deliberately silly and comical things specifically to get attention from their owners, and this behavior was reinforced by generations of selection for dogs that served as entertainers in courts and palaces. Pugs are also notoriously stubborn and independent in their thinking. They are definitely intelligent and perfectly capable of learning commands quickly, but often deliberately choose not to obey if they don't see clear benefit for themselves. This can make them challenging to train compared to naturally obedient breeds like Border Collies or German Shepherds. In addition to nocturnal snoring that practically 100% of pugs produce due to respiratory problems, they also make a surprising variety of bizarre and unique sounds, including deep grunts, wheezy and panting breathing, and even something that experienced owners affectionately call pug talk, which are strange vocalizations that seem like attempts at verbal communication. These sounds are part of the breed's unique charm, but also reflect their chronic respiratory challenges. Pugs are extremely adaptable to different living environments, functioning equally well in small apartments or large houses, in busy cities or peaceful countryside. This makes them excellent dogs for practically any life situation, as long as they have adequate human company. But there are also problematic aspects of temperament that arise with worrying frequency. Severe separation anxiety affects approximately 65% of pugs to some degree, manifesting as object destruction, excessive vocalization, or even self-mutilation when left alone for prolonged periods. This is a direct consequence of centuries of selection for extreme human dependence. Jealousy can be a significant problem, with many pugs becoming jealous and even aggressive when they perceive that attention is being given to other pets or even other human family members. Obsessive food motivation is practically universal in the breed, with pugs being absolutely obsessed with food in a way that goes far beyond normal even for dogs. This makes obesity a critical and chronic problem because pugs simply don't have the functional internal satiety mechanism that regulates food intake in most dogs. They will literally eat until they become sick if they have unlimited access to food. But beyond these 7 main secrets, there are critical health problems that absolutely every current or future pug owner must know and understand completely before assuming the responsibility of caring for one of these dogs. The set of respiratory problems known as brachycephalic syndrome has already been extensively discussed, but it's worth emphasizing that it is probably the most serious and impactful health problem on the pug's quality of life. Pug encephalitis, abbreviated as PDE, is an inflammatory neurological disease of the brain that is breed-specific, genetically determined, progressive, and invariably fatal. It affects approximately 1 to 2% of all pugs, generally manifesting before 7 years of age, with symptoms that include seizures, behavioral changes, loss of coordination, and progressive neurological deterioration. There is no cure, and most affected dogs need to be euthanized within weeks or a few months of diagnosis. Eye problems have already been discussed, but it's worth repeating that they include proptosis, where the eye comes out of the orbit, frequent corneal ulcers, chronic dry eye, entropion, and distichiasis, and vertebral problems include the hemivertebrae that cause the curled tail but also appear in other parts of the spine, plus degenerative intervertebral disc disease that causes pain and potential paralysis. Obesity affects an impressive 60% of pugs and dramatically exacerbates all other health problems. Dental problems are extremely common because the small short jaw results in crowded and misaligned teeth that accumulate plaque and tartar quickly, leading to severe periodontal disease often before 5 years of age. Allergies, both food and environmental, are surprisingly common, affecting between 30 and 40% of the breed, manifesting as chronic itching, recurrent skin infections, and gastrointestinal problems. The average life expectancy of a pug is between 12 and 15 years, which seems reasonable at first glance, but epidemiological studies show that pugs live on average 2 to 3 years less than other breeds of similar body size, and this difference is mainly attributed to chronic respiratory problems and epidemic obesity. A comprehensive economic study published in 2021 in the United Kingdom meticulously calculated that pug owners spend on average between 40 and 60% more in cumulative veterinary costs over the dog's lifetime compared to genetically healthier breeds of similar size, reflecting the heavy burden of health problems the breed carries. The pug is, without any doubt, an absolutely extraordinary and special breed, full of striking personality, unconditional love, and unique physical characteristics that make them instantly recognizable and universally adored. But each of these adorable characteristics that make the pug what it is comes with a significant and often tragic price in terms of health, quality of life, and special care needed. The perfect curled tail can mean vertebral problems in other parts of the spine. The adorable flat snout means chronic respiratory difficulty and exercise intolerance. The large expressive eyes are vulnerable to injuries and diseases. The charming wrinkles require meticulous daily cleaning to prevent infections. The compact body predisposes to joint problems and obesity. The dependent personality can result in severe separation anxiety. Responsibility for the breed's future is firmly in our collective hands. As current or future owners, we must commit to providing extraordinary and specialized care that goes far beyond what would be necessary for healthier breeds. This means rigorous daily cleaning of facial wrinkles, absolutely rigorous weight control through carefully measured diet and regular exercise within respiratory limitations, mandatory air-conditioned environments, especially during warm months, constant and vigilant attention to breathing quality, and much more frequent veterinary visits for preventive monitoring. As current or future breeders, we have the fundamental ethical responsibility to prioritize health and welfare above extreme and potentially cruel aesthetic standards. This means actively supporting the growing movement for breeding pugs with slightly longer snouts that dramatically alleviate respiratory problems, selecting against hemivertebrae in critical regions of the spine, and promoting genetic diversity through careful crossbreeding that reduces inbreeding. As a community of breed lovers, we have the responsibility to honestly and completely educate future owners about the practical realities of living with a pug, not just the irresistible cuteness and comical charm, but also the significant financial responsibilities, laborious daily care, and emotional challenges of caring for a dog with special health needs. The pug has given us literally thousands of years of loyal companionship, unconditional love, and genuine joy. These small dogs have been companions of Chinese emperors, European kings, Renaissance artists, and millions of ordinary families around the world. Now it is definitely our turn to return this gift, ensuring that future generations of pugs are bred more healthily, maintain their unique charm and wonderful personality that everyone loves, but suffer dramatically less from the health problems that currently afflict the breed. The 7 secrets of the pug have been completely revealed. Scientific knowledge has been honestly shared. Ethical responsibility has been clearly defined. This is the complete true story of the pug, a breed that is simultaneously an impressive marvel of human-artificial selection over millennia, and a solemn reminder that we must always, without exception, place animal welfare and quality of life above our personal aesthetic preferences, arbitrary traditions, or outdated breed standards. The future of the pug, and of all brachycephalic breeds facing similar challenges, depends on the choices we make today as owners, breeders, veterinarians, cynological clubs, and society in general. Let us choose wisely. Let us choose compassionately. Let us choose to put dogs first.